Hi, 5th grade, here to read chapter 40 of When the Sea Turned to Silver. I hope you're enjoying the book so far. I think food first, the woman said with a smile. Come. She led them through another gate to the inner courtyard and past the side hall, her fingers pressed to her lips for silence. Despite her size, she walked noiselessly, and they followed her to the kitchen. The warmth of the room made them stumble as if they were wading in honey. She led them to the stove and began to spoon rice porridge into bowls, its steam issuing like a sighing breath. Eat, the woman said, holding out a large bowl, her large fingers almost completely hiding the design of the painted monkey. Thank you, Lady Ming said, taking it. It matters not, said the woman, pressing another bowl toward Yashen. But, Pinmi said as the woman held out a third bowl, the rich smell of porridge was intoxicating, and its hot mist made a translucent cloud around the woman, softening her many scars. Who are you? The woman laughed. I am just a servant of the house of Wu, she said, of no importance, I assure you. Your master must be very kind, Lady Ming said. The woman laughed again. Oh no, she said. They are quite the opposite, in fact. Then, Pinmi said, won't you get in trouble? Most probably, the woman said, nodding, but Pinmi hesitated as Yashen gave her a pointed look. She didn't want to be cast out, but she needed to understand. Why are you helping us? The woman looked at Pinmi, smiled sadly, and lifted the lantern up to her face. Do you know what kind of scars these are? The woman asked her. With the light on them, Pinmi could see they were all shaped like small, sharp slivers. Are they, Pinmi said slowly, almost in disbelief, scars of stinging rice? Yes, the old woman said, nodding. You know the story. What is the story? Lady Ming said, looking from Pinmi to the woman. Ah, I am no good at storytelling, the old woman said. She looked at Pinmi. You tell. The story of the scars of stinging rice. So it's a short story. There was once a rich lord who had always been wealthy. Perhaps one reason he had so much money was because he never gave to the poor. During times of famine and drought, he never gave one spoonful of rice to a starving child, even though his jars were overflowing with grains. In fact, he flaunted his fortune. Every day, equally wealthy friends were invited to dine on jade tree chicken and silk squash noodles, while the hungry stood outside on the streets by his house. When the rich lord turned 60, he decided he would throw his most lavish banquet. I have seen the year of the monkey 5 times, the Lord said with pride. I shall have a celebration to match such an auspicious event. So he ordered the slaughter of a half-dozen pigs and a flock of ducks and arranged for the most luxurious long life robe to be made for himself. As he inspected the fabric, After he inspected the fabric, a blue silk pleased him so much he decided not only to have a robe made of it, but also to use it to line the roads to his house. It will be a fitting pathway to my home, he thought. However, the road outside the house was not in good condition, and the delicate silk wrinkled over the many cracks and holes in the street. This will not do, the Lord roared, and he commanded his servants to even out the road by filling the gaps with uncooked rice. But won't people try to take the rice? The servant protested. Have anyone who tries arrested, the Lord growled. No beggar is to steal even a single grain. So the servants did as they were told, to the horrified awe of the people on the streets. More than once, hungry beggars attempted to grab a handful of rice, but the Lord's servants promptly had them thrown in jail. When the servants finished their work and the silk lay smoothly on the road, an old man came walking down it, leaning on a stick. As he walked, the grains of rice made a crunching noise under his feet. He stopped in front of the Lord's house, raising his head to breathe in the delicious smell of the upcoming banquet. 8 treasured ducks, the old man murmured to himself, licking his lips as if he were tasting the savory flavors. Lion head pork meatballs. Away from here, a servant cried. Away! Please, the old man said, stretching out his arm. Your master is having a grand feast. Surely you can spare a small bit for me? Go, the servants yelled, waving a stick. Perhaps, the old man said, I could just take a few grains of rice then. The old man reached down and plucked some rice from underneath the silk. Thief, the servant bellowed, calling for the others. Thief! With the other servants came the lord of the house, who was furious to be called away from his party. You worthless body, the lord screeched. How dare you try and steal from me? He turned to his servants. Beat him until every part of him is bruised and broken. The servants lifted their sticks, but instead of cowering, the old man stood calmly. The servants hesitated, but the Lord snapped angrily. Do as I say, now. They began striking him. The old man remained unmoved, but after the first few blows, the Lord began to howl with pain. Stop, he cried, stop. For each time they hit the old man, it was the Lord who felt it. He collapsed, whimpering on the ground. The old man continued to stand. Goodbye, he said to the stunned crowd. I cannot say I enjoyed your company, but I shall leave you something to remember me by. He walked down the silk pathway. When he reached the end of the silk, he turned to look at the staring servants and the sniveling lord and bent down. Then, as if breathing out a cloud, he blew. The silk lifted and waved, and the hundreds of thousands of grains of rice rose into the air. They whipped up into the sky and flew towards the Lord and his servants like a swarm of mosquitoes. They cringed, but the rice fell upon them without mercy, melting into their skin. Immediately, their faces and bodies were covered with hundreds of white scars, all shaped like the grains of rice that had rained upon them. They shouted in dismay and shock and looked for the old man, but the old man was nowhere in sight. Unlike the scars, he had faded away and was never seen again. That's the end of that story. Yes, yes, the woman said. It was just like that. The old story had been whispered down through the House of Wu for generations, but none believed it happened, or if it did, that it could happen again. But it did in almost exactly the same way, except it was my mistress, and she had a silk, the green color of jade. She shook her head. How they loved their jade. Then did you, Pinmi faltered. The scarred woman sat down heavily and looked at her empty hands, her bell-shaped figure and iron shadow in the light of the lantern. I was named after a great hero, you know, she said softly, and I always wanted to be the same. And back then it seemed like I was, for I was mighty as any man and just as proud. The fire in the cook stove flickered and waved, making noise like the opening of a crumpled paper. Outside, the black sky began to thin. But that was only on the outside, the scarred woman said, her huge shoulders slumping. Inside, I was weak and cowardly. I was too scared not to follow the commands of my master. I bet the beggar. The woman lifted her head. Night was fading, and faint gauze ribbons of light stretched through the windows towards them. When I heard you calling for help, she said, putting her hands on Pinmi's cheek, I knew this was a chance to make amends for my past shame. I could not be a coward again. You have to thank me, but it is I who thank you. You have thanked me, but it is I who thank you. Outside the sun rose and the soft light streamed in. The gray glow of morning did nothing to disguise the scars on the woman's face, but they could see the gentle look in her eyes. Pinmi felt tears beginning to sting. The woman's hands were warm and wrinkled, touching hers with a tenderness so much like Amma's. You are tired, the woman said. Come and rest. Pinmi let herself be led to a large pillow next to the stove, its heat bathing her with warmth. Her weary legs and arms were limp and all but collapsed onto the padding. Who was the hero you were named after? Pinmi asked, her eyes already beginning to close. The great Hai, the woman said. He was one of my ancestors, but Pinmi began to yawn, interrupting her words. Shh, the woman said. It matters not. Pinme's words and fears melted in the warmth of the woman's kindness, and she did not try to say more. She was so tired. Now, the woman said, just rest. So Pinme did. Thank you for listening. We'll be back on Monday with chapter 41. Have a great weekend.